do it, then won't you do the whole of the law?
Let us law under will.
I suppose it's appropriate that early in this weekend that we begin with a talk, or not begin, but fit in early into the schedule, a discussion about Liber Oz and how it came to be written and how Crowley's contemporaries responded to it. And before getting into that, I wanted to start with another passage of Crowley's that kind of comes to mind with this document, and that is in one of Crowley's writings from the American period. He writes that we are living at a time when freedom is about to deliver decisive combat against the forces of tyranny, superstition, and oppression. And from the same period, there's also a letter which puts these words into a very striking context for me. And that's in a letter to Charles Stansfield Jones from February 7th, 1919. Crowley writes, "The OTO has a perfectly definite function in connection with the new eon. At a time like the present, when individual liberty is threatened in a way to which history offers no parallel, a strong and vigorous order is required to guard humanity." So now if we think about this, 1919, what was going on?
The end of World War I.
World War I, exactly. And this is combat on a scale that had never been seen before. And so when Crowley wrote those words about tyranny, superstition, and oppression, he was actually talking about something a very real threat. And so what winds up happening is 20 years down the road, World War II happens. And just to kind of put this into some context, up on the screen here, there's a few of the books that Crowley was writing at around the time we're talking about. So we've got 8 lectures on yoga. Actually, I brought some visual aids here with me, so if you want to take a look at these after the talk, you're welcome to it. Temperance, A Tract for the Times. This is another one of his books that came out. This one's kind of important. This is printed by the Apex Press, and it's the same press that Crowley would turn to for printing Liber Oz for him as well. And they're Fun of the Fair, another one of his, basically a reprint of one of his articles from the English Review. But in addition to this, Crowley was actually writing a lot of patriotic poetry for the war effort. So we've got England Stand Fast, La Gauloise, a poem for the French as well, and the patriotic poem Thumbs Up, where Crowley was seeing this as one of the magical counter gestures to the Nazi use of the swastika. In fact, it is the second edition of Thumbs Up, which came out in September of 1941, where Crowley actually identifies himself as the author of the V sign, the V for victory sign. And throughout his correspondence of this period, he's very much insisting that he's the one that kind of came up with this, snuck it past people at the BBC, and finally got it adopted. I'll leave that to you to decide how much credence you give that, but Crowley's correspondence is filled with him saying this, and his subsequent publications, like Thumbs Up, try to cement that perspective of him, in this really patriotic role. And it's in his correspondence about this edition of Thumbs Up that we find the earliest reference to Liber Oz. And writing to Gerald York on August 30th of 1941. So much of this we're talking August through the end of 1941, it's in your time scale. But he says, "I hope too that it, Thumbs Up, will put me in the proper place to make plain my way to issue the war aims, or is it peace aims, of the new eon. I'll send you the OTO plan in words of one syllable as promised in a few days." Now, it winds up taking a little bit longer than a few days, but that document is what becomes Liber Oz. So what are these war aims that Crowley is talking about, and where do they come from? Well, writing to Karl Germer, Crowley makes it clear that this text originally came from, as he says, I have expanded part of the oath of some degree of OTO and called it Liber 77 Oz the Goat. And he also says in another letter to Karl Burner that he took that text and added some other text in Liber Oz and expanded it to form what we now know today as Liber Oz. And here we see the manuscript, the handwritten text of Liber Oz, and this actually comes from Robert Flores' forthcoming book on the rights of man. And this is basically a story of how Liber Oz came to be written, and its life, not only during Crowley's time, but also in the years that followed, and its republications over decades. And this book will actually, all proceeds from the sale of that book will be going to OTO. So if you're interested in finding out more about Liber Oz, there's way more in this book than I can possibly cover in the span of the time I have here today. So anyway, we get to Crowley trying to put this together. Because again, he was kind of revising and trying to come up with something a little bit new and expanding to come up with this to suit his needs. So in October 10th, he's writing in his diary, start to prepare OTO manifesto. Went over draft at lunch, nothing much to alter. Then Robert Cecil at 6:30 comes by, very pleasant talk, all too short, showed him War Aims of 93, highly approved. So did Harold Mortlake, who was a British bookseller at the time, and Gerald York. However, he struggled coming up with a name for this document. So he says, writing to Gerald York in September, so this is a month after he said, I'll send you the document in a few days. He writes, I don't like the title so far. Rights of Man is an historical document. The rights don't easily go on the tree. They've got them down to 5 sections: moral, bodily, mental, sexual freedom, and the safeguard, tyrannicide. This new form looks shapely and well balanced. At this point, he says 160 words in all. Of course, in practice, almost impossible to do anything without clashing with somebody. But this is because the rule is not accepted. Same applies to cricket or machines. Our claim is that the system minimizes friction. So the idea there is, if everyone were doing very well, we wouldn't be having the sort of conflict that he just described. Or at least it would minimize that. Then writing in his journal a little bit later, November 5th, he says, oh, for a title of my war aims. Can't use rights of man. I want to keep it monosymbolic. Chart is no good. Words of the way of will. Watchwords. And he just starts free associating here. Law, plan, sketch, step, strict, path, clue, key, rule, guard, base, curve, straight line, snake. Snake? So just free associating, trying to come up with something, and then finally, the next day, his diary says, concentrating on the title for War Aims card. Goat's milk? Suckle Jupiter? Then he thinks, the Hebrew word Oz, 77 equals strength. The letters Ayin are the devil, and Zayn is the lovers. So he decides, Oz! That's it. Recopied the whole beastly thing and made a dummy with the proof using the devil tarot card. 220 words in the actual text, excluding title. And again, 220 is significant because it's the number of verses in the Book of the Law. So he promptly writes to Frieda Harris that he will, quote, settle finally the war aims of Thelema. I shall ask you to let me use one of the colored cards for the banner of the manifesto. This will serve as an official OTO New Year card. And we're off to the races. So from there, Crowley goes about trying to get some quotes and donations to make this happen. So in his diary on November 8th, again, this is just the very next day, one of his students, Gerald Bailey, is here at his stupidest. Stayed too long, bored me dreadfully, but he will put £1.05 to the printing of Oz. Writing to one of his other students, Edward Old Fitzgerald, he says, anyhow, send what money you can spare, and you shall have as many cards as that amount is produced. And again, at the same time, writing to Gerald York, he writes, I'm struggling desperately to get the book out by December 22nd, Sol 0 degrees in Capricorn, the winter solstice. I should welcome a little help from any source. One good push and the whole show will go into place. Do lend a stout shoulder. And likewise writes to Carl Germer with the same sort of sentiment. So basically kind of going out to the usual suspects. His diary for October 11th says that Hughes, the publisher from Apex Protein, was out here to do an estimate and came back with an estimate of £3, free shillings for 200 copies. And then Frida Harris. His diary for November 12th. This is the day that morning. He pays for 300 copies of Liber Oz to be printed, and then he gets an express letter from Frida warning me not to publish Liber Oz. And this letter, to my knowledge, hasn't really been well circulated, so I kind of want to read this to you at length. Said, my dear Aleister, do what thou wilt show me the whole of the law. I have your letter where he's asking to use the card for a manifesto, and I know what you're going to do for a Christmas card. Now, please forgive me, probably I don't understand, and you must explain. This card, I understand, is to be sent to many people, uninitiates. What made you choose that particular card? I am afraid it will do great harm to getting the pack of tarot cards published. It is bound to be shown to many people outside. They will get into their heads that the whole pack is a mass of obscene sex symbols. One of Crowley's dirty jokes. The man can't keep away from cheap innuendos. Yes, I can and have heard them. I take it you want the other side to read to drive it home. Dear Aleister, you have gone so far, you forget the reactions of, say, the barmaid in England. Ha ha, I'll show this to them. Oh dear, how shall I explain? No doubt I am wrong, but we do want to get some money and help to get the cards together. So this is basically what she's thinking, that if he mails out his Christmas card, is basically he's sending an unsolicited dick pic to England. And in fact, she goes on to write, that card to the public is a pictorial representation of the male organ, and your Christmas greeting will be taken as a filthy postcard. Please do reconsider it. It will alienate all the people I've been working at. If it is a question of having another back, do use one of the new colored plates or the fortune which you've already reproduced. I never dare interfere with you, but the spirit got me out of my nice bed at 6 a.m. to write to you. I think Mercury also has a joke with you sometimes. Love is the law, love and will, yours, Frida. And then she appends, I am sure that this is dangerous for you personally. Public opinion is a nervous condition. It is not wise to let it find a victim. Dick pic. Freedom. A conundrum, a dilemma. So his diary, for the very next, let's see, is it the next day? 2 days later, he writes, he's got a proof of Liber Oz from Hughes, from the Apex Publishers. And he says, completely insane letter card from Ethel Archer, one of his former students from the Equinox days. Warns me not to publish Oz. Again. This being the second time I asked for a message. And so he casts the I Ching and gets hexagram 1, Qian, which Crowley, when he does I Ching, Qian is again, being hexagram 1, he often interprets that as the beginning of a new magical cycle. So his diary goes on to say, yes, this is a big, important move. Another crazy letter from Frida Harris begging me not to publish Oz. So again, if you'll indulge me, I will read this one to you as well. Dear Aleister, do indulge me the whole of the law. Being so very woeful, you must die, but I wish you would not crash the work. Your reaction to my letter was extremely personal. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find what that reaction was, but I'll keep digging. Again and again, I have seen you kill your own efforts in an attempt to achieve balance. I think this card, again, is an instance. The fact that people are such fools that they don't realize the form of that picture does not prevent other fools from turning it into a pornographic picture. Watkins, for example, already at the moment to help me will refuse. Yes, it will be found out to be a tarot card. Oh, I wish for my sake you would not do it. It seems hopeless to ask you not to degrade the work you are put on this planet to do by opening the gate to absurd comment. You will fail because you do not believe in the clever, silly sort of person who is too clever to be bludgeoned by you into blind acquiescence. I am writing in the post office. I feel deeply about this. I am unable to withdraw the card, yet for the sake of the work in which I have labored for 3 years, I implore you to think again and not be so obstinate, which I know is one of my faults, or so lazy as to allow this publication to continue. It is the sort of thing you have done over and over again, and yet you complain that you are not in a position of authority and are persecuted. Love is the law, love under will, yours in haste, Frida. And then she appends, I am not writing to the master, but to poor, tiny Aleister. So, interestingly enough, his diary entry, kind of behind here, for November 16th, just a day later, says, Frida Harris rang up for Minehead, will send me the Eon to use for the Oz card. And the next day, his diary records, policy regarding Liber 77. I Ching gets hexagram 59 Huang. Carry it through solemnly and vigorously. Line 1, asked BB, I'm not sure who that is offhand, to help with cost. 2, make all but 50, the devil, Capricorn, strictly private and or delayed. 3, ignore personal risk. 4, start a party in the state. 5, proclaim loudly with great energy and distribute regardless of expense. 6, use this to heal past trouble to gain confidence for future activity. So basically the idea there is, he's still got this quote for printing 300 cards. He's going to do only 50 with the devil and another 250 with the Eon. So he did in fact acquiesce to Frida Harris on that point. So winds up, then again, he clarifies this in his own diary entry a couple days later on November 18th. It's the 43rd anniversary of his neophyte initiation of the Golden Dawn, which he always marked as his magical birthday. He says, woke from a pleasant and amusing sex dream. Yay, little Aleister. Press proof of 77, edition of 50 Capricorn and 250 Shin, the Aeon. Next day, the blocks to Liber Oz shows up, the printer's blocks. And on the 24th, he notes, anti-Christmas cards came at 2:30, sent cards to Frida Harris. And then the next day he gets, actually the 29th, he gets £5 from Edward Noel Fitzgerald, £10 from Cecil for the cards, and more money coming from Saturnus Carl Verner in New York. So all is good. And so, let's see, on December 4th, right, we're coming up on the solstice here, Crowley writes to Gerald York, Dear Gerald, 93, I'm sending you 12 cards with envelopes, also one of the Capricorn, i.e. the devil cards. I can't remember if I sent you one. Frida is very anxious that these goats don't get into improper hands. If you want some for people you can trust, I'll send them along. I only had 50, but I'm getting some more done if I can find better cardboard. Also writing to Carl Germer on the 21st. He says, I'm hellishly busy with the solstice, Liber 77. I hope you've got that two cards, the devil and the Eon, from the tarot in this book 77 on the back. So the effect of this is says will come into force the next autumnal equinox. So this is the solstice, the autumnal equinox is like 9 months away, and there's this whole idea of this being like a magical gesture. And I'll come around back to that as we go on. Oh, actually, we'll get into that right now. So to clarify what he means by this coming into force the next autumnal equinox, here's a letter he wrote to Lewis Umfreville Wilkinson, basically his lifelong buddy, fellow writer, also a member of the Sanctuary of the Gnosis. Crowley writes, "Still, it has been rather fun preparing Liber 77, the book of the goats. I am so absorbed into my own spiritual blotting paper that with the publication of this manifesto, I thought of calling it Goat's Note with a glance in your direction, may amount to a magical gesture. I could ensure this, I suppose, by doing something idiotic in public at the moment of the solstice. Well, if it does count as a gesture, we may look for a bloody great revolution of some sort at the autumn equinox." And then, writing to Lewis Wilkinson the following month, he elaborates or repeats himself. January 8th, 1942. "I think this publication may turn out to be a magical gesture. You may therefore look for a revolution in one form or another at the autumnal equinox. In fact, I rather expect you to lead it. Something will have to be done." So, as discussed, there were 2 different editions of Liber Oz that came out on the winter solstice of 1941. There's this version, which contained the text of Liber Oz with an image of the devil from the Thoth deck, which again, I should bear in mind, Crowley and Friedrich Harris were still working on this. The deck had not, there have been a couple of exhibitions, but in general, this has not been seen. The Book of Thoth would not come out for another 3 years. So this is really the first time the public has, gotten to see these, or at least these cards have been printed in any form. Now, the other edition has the Eon. One thing that's kind of interesting that you might note is that if you're familiar with the Eon card in the Thoth Tarot, there is a ghostly image of Harpocrates superimposed on this card, and this version does not have that feature. So at some point, Harpocrates got added to the card, and that's one of these mysteries. Like, when did that happen? Was that Crowley's idea? Was that Frida's doing? That's one I haven't been able to figure out. But those are the 2 editions of Liber Oz that came out. And as a magical gesture, Crowley mailed out the cards to 11 specific people on the day of publication, the winter solstice. So the first of the people he sent this to was H.G. Wells, a prolific English writer in many genres. He was known for social commentary, satire, biography, and we remember him today as being a science fiction writer. But during his lifetime, he was actually well known as kind of this forward-thinking and almost prophetic writer, and a very progressive one at that. He wrote a number of utopian works and foresaw the advent of airplanes, tanks, space travel, nuclear weapons, satellite television, and something resembling the World Wide Web. And also, interestingly enough, back in 1910, Crowley had invited and sent tickets to H.G. Wells to attend the Rites of Eleusis, but he did not attend. Second person he sent this to was Edward Arthur Donald St. George Hamilton Chichester, the 6th Marquess of Donegal. He was a British peer and as the title Marquess suggests, and a journalist. He told friends and acquaintances not to stand on ceremony by addressing him as my Lord Marquess. But he didn't like people using his first name either, so he asked them to call him Don. In addition to taking up a career in journalism, he had a lifelong interest in aviation and owned his own aircraft and used that for covering news stories. So if H.G. Wells was sent a copy of Liber Oz for literature and prophecy, The Marquess of Donegal was sent a copy as a representative of the peerage, of the press, and of the heir. Next person sent occurred to was Dr. Ivor Back. This is the doctor who actually oversaw Rose Crowley's pregnancy and delivered her daughter, blanking her name, Lola Jaja. And so Crowley sent him one. That's kind of the interesting thing. A lot of these people on this list are folks that Crowley actually knows. For instance, as a representative of art, he mailed a copy to Gerald Festus Kelly, his college chum from Trinity College and ex-brother-in-law, so brother of Rose. And for the Army, he sent a copy to Major General J.F.C. Fuller, with whom Crowley and George Cecil Jones started the AA way back in the day, 1906, 1907. Even though they parted ways over that whole rights of Lucius stink and the libel suit that George Cecil Jones sued the Looking Glass over and lost. You know, that was one of these things where Fuller said, "I can't, for my own career, I cannot be friends with you. This is your reputation is kind of risky here." And so, even though they never communicated, Fuller continued to collect Crowley's works all his life. And when he finally sold his collection in the 60s, you know, he basically said that he considered Crowley to be a genius and one of England's greatest poets. So, you know, he received this Liber Oz, never acknowledged that they really didn't have correspondence, but he still, you know, respected Crowley but held him at a distance, which I think is kind of interesting. For the Navy in the House of Commons, a copy went to Admiral Sir Roger John Brownlow Keyes, a Conservative member of Parliament. One of the things I find really interesting as you look through Crowley's life is just the number of high-ranking military people that he knew. And when you kind of think about that in terms of Crowley having done intelligence work, it kind of makes sense that he would know all those folks. Next, F.W. Hilton. I Googled Hilton and this image came up. I don't know if it's the same Hilton, but this is the representative of agriculture.
Seems legit.
Yeah, Kaczynski said so, it must be true. For law, he sent a copy to Frederick Herbert Malm, the first Viscount Malm, a British lawyer and judge who served as Lord Chancellor in the late 1930s, then served as Lord of Appeal in the Ordinary Court in 1941, and is the older brother of Somerset Maugham, whose novel The Magician included, you know, the character Oliver Haddo, inspired by Crowley. So kind of keep it in the family here. And then next for the church, he sent a copy to the vicar of St. George's. And looking around, trying to figure out who this could possibly be, I arrived at a possibility in the name of the Honorable Stephen Henry Fillmore, who had been the Archdeacon of Middlesex and the vicar of St. Thomas. St. George's didn't actually have a vicar, so I don't know if Crowley misspoke, but he was the rector of St. George's at this time. So he's a pretty good candidate for who that recipient, although I couldn't find a photograph of him. For trade, he sent a copy to someone by the name of Allchild, and I'm assuming that this must have been Charles Allchild, who was the landlord of the Fitzroy Tavern. And that was kind of a place where all the Bohemians kind of hung out, and Crowley spent a lot of time there himself. And then finally, for BBC and stage, he sent a copy to Esme Saville Percy, who was a thespian of English stage and screen, and had a reputation for interpreting the roles and plays of George Bernard Shaw. Now, Crowley wrote the Gospel according to George Bernard Shaw while he was living here in New Hampshire. And so again, there's this whole logic and internal consistency to who Crowley picks to send these things to. In the 1930s, Percy became a character actor, and he played Count Aristide Carpathy in Pygmalion, a role written for him by Shaw himself. So, Crowley's diary for this day lists these 11 people and says they were mailed at 9:45 a.m. true times. That is the date of the official publication date of Liber Oz. So, December 21st, 9:45 a.m. And he writes, I have hinted like a fool to one or two people about this magical gesture. I hope that won't spoil it. An addenda to his diary also lists other people that he sent the card to, and this includes people like Lady Harris, Carl Gerner, J.G. Bailey, one of his students, various other people, York, Noel Fitzgerald, and so on. Clickers, you know.
Some actors don't want to leave the stage.
Yes.
The
Frozen?
house is moving.
Okay. So, January 8th, this is shortly after sending out the cards, Dion Fortune writes Aleister Crowley saying, many thanks for dear 666. Many thanks for your letter and card. I'm glad you find my tabernacles pleasant. I have no idea what you're talking about, but
She was reputed.
yeah. But she again thanking him for the card, which is obviously Liber Oz. And she says, I saw designs for two of your tarot trumps at the Atlantis bookshop when calling upon Michael just, and thought them very fine. I should be interested to know when they were published. So apparently, at this point, Crowley and Frida Harris were working with the Sun Engraving Company to have some plates of the cards done. So we're including some images tipped into the Book of Thoth. And so they had a lot of test prints, and Crowley was kind of sending them around. So it's pretty likely that Michael at Atlantis Books had a couple copies that he could show people, and he unfortunately got to see them. So, it's around this time, mid-January, January 15th, Crowley sends a telegram to Carl Gerner, who is now living in the U.S., and says, Liber 777 constitutes Master's Manifesto. Reprint yourselves. Distribute widely, giving American address, writing applications, collaboration. Stop. Smith's pronunciamento unauthorized St. Bumptious. Horseman. But this telegram basically is saying, you guys over there on the other side of the Atlantic print your own copies, and so in fact they did. I've got a copy of that here too, if any of you want to see it in person or in the flesh. But here on the screen though is showing that it's issued from the Sanctuary of Gnosis in the Valley of Los Angeles. And the inside, similar to the British edition, reproduces the devil and the text of Liber Oz. Crowley, to say he was unhappy with this version would be understating the case. So in April, he finally sees this and writes to Carl Gerner, I have certainly had my say about Liber Oz. I can't understand your saying it looks very good. There was no point in reproducing that goat card at all. But if it was wanted, it was a job for a first-class firm. And then he such would have told Smith there was no good reproduction was possible from the card that I sent. I only pray that Lady Harris never sees a copy. And in June, they don't jump ahead, so that's Crowley complaining to Carl Gerner. And then Smith in June writes to Crowley, doubtless you could have used that $150 that they used for printing Liber Oz for the tarot, but Germer, your official representative, asked and okayed a reprint as he did in Liber Oz, which you were so disgusted. After this, some other editions of Liber Oz did come out. There's a postcard edition with a photograph of Crowley. I've heard this referred to as the Boris Karloff edition because of the spooky lighting, and then Liber Oz on the flip side. One interesting thing about this one, as you will note, let's back up just a bit. Here is the previous edition. It was published in the U.S., which basically reproduces, the first UK edition. So this is the first one that actually bears Crowley's signature at the bottom. Let's see, and this one came out about February 1942, so just a couple months after those 300 cards were printed and mailed out. There's a second postcard edition, which has a photo of Crowley on it, and that kind of came out later, August of that year. And this edition is just kind of a low-quality copy, but it came from the archives of Montgomery Evans II, and it's just an example of Crowley having mailed the postcard out to his lawyers at the time. So the address is Forsyth, Kerman, and Phillips in London. So I just thought it was kind of cool to see like an actual version that Crowley wrote out and mailed out to someone. And there was this postcard edition, basically the same sort of format, Liber Oz on one side and then a photo of Crowley on the other with a place to write the address and the message. And this one's kind of interesting because it includes this caption that says, Aleister Crowley, author of the V sign, Song of the Fighting French, thumbs up, etc., etc. So again, kind of positioning this as a very patriotic kind of text. There's also a envelope edition. So basically what we had was this picture of Crowley with his pipe and turban and all of that, and it had a blank side. So Liber Oz was on the other side of this. It was on the outside of the envelope, basically. And the inside, you just kind of fold it over. It had a gum side that you would just fold over to seal it up. And then so this came out basically on the equinox, spring equinox of 1943, so kind of a year and a bit after the first edition. Shown on the right is a copy of this particular version of Liber Oz that Crowley sent to Kenneth Grant. And once again, this image, the one that went to Kenneth Grant, comes again from Robert Forrest's forthcoming book on Liber Oz, so check that out. And then finally, there's just this really simple postcard edition, kind of blank on the one side, and various versions of that were printed over the years. So I guess the idea is you see a lot of different versions of Liber Oz being printed just in the span of like a year and a bit. And Crowley mailed these out, handed them out to people, the rest of his life. Crowley died in 1947, so this is kind of, something he was doing like for the last 6 years of his life. But, he was just, committed to just sending these out to whoever he could. And one other version that bears mentioning is The City of God, which is another one of his reprints from the English Review. And this one's a little bit thinner than the front of the fair, but when he printed this one, this came out in 1943, at the back of the booklet as shown here, he also included Liber Oz and appended that to the text. Now, there was a trend going on in England at this time called mass observation. And you could think of this almost as being like market research or, having a panel, like people do with TV shows now where you get people to sit down and watch a commercial and you get the reactions and so on. And that's basically this idea. And so in October of 1942, this is actually on his birthday, as we'll see, Crowley sent out the following letter to members of the OTO. And again, if you'll indulge me, I'll read the whole thing here because it's very interesting, I think. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I do not wish to issue the following as an instruction, for I know how hard it is to carry out. Yet, let me say to that, the more difficult that it appears to you, the more value it will prove to your training. Further, I can think of no other sort of work which is, after all, within the possibilities of performance for every one of you that could be greater use to the order. Lastly, I should personally appreciate it as a gift on my 67th birthday, for 67 is the number of Binah, understanding. From each of one of you, to help me in my greatest need, the understanding of the minds of men and women and children. The work is this. Select 6 persons of your acquaintance outside the order and obtain their reactions as fully as may be to Liber Oz. Select 6 strangers met by chance in public conveyances or places of refreshment and entertainment, and do the same. Quote, argue not, convert not, talk over much, end quote. Liber Oz, chapter 3, verse 42. What I want is the fullest and most accurate account of the reactions, both in words and tone and gesture. Give also the impressions you get of the individual. I should like the matter put in hand at once and pursued perseveringly. Each should set himself a fixed date for turning in this report, typed in triplicate, to local headquarters, which will retain and file 1 copy, the others being sent to New York, that's where Karl Kerner was living at the time, and where another copy will be filed, and the 3rd sent to me. Love is the law, love under will, and the bonds of the order, the bonds of the order, Baphomet, OHO. So essentially, again, he was trying to do market research here, show people Liber Oz, people you know who are not initiates, strangers on the street, get their reaction. Sounds to me like this is like a hilarious Samantha Bee skit or something. But anyway, the results of this were ultimately disappointing to Crowley, and there's a letter in Magic Without Tears where he has this to say. All this made me exceedingly sorrowful. I begin to understand why my Liber Oz, written entirely in words of 1 syllable only, with this very idea in mind, turned out to be completely beyond the average man or woman's understanding. I had some mass observation done on it, and he has some quotes. But this is rank socialism. Say, ain't this fascism? Oh golly, cripes, coup, how dreadful. About the nearest most of them got to Ralph Strauss and Desmond McCarthy. Words of 1 syllable. Lewis Marlowe, who was Umfreville Wilkinson, had already told me what a fool I was to expect that. All they can digest, he said, is a mess of stewed cliches with bird's custard powder. Damn everything, it's true, it's true. So, again, Crowley lamented that what he thought was just perfectly clear, this was misconstrued and misunderstood by a lot of people, and that seems to be an ongoing trend, but despite that reservation, Liber Oz is a document that has continued to be reprinted and distributed, not only throughout the OTO, but just through Willamette culture in general. So on this slide are just 2 examples I happen to have kicking around. This cute little fully open business card sized version was put up by Living Flame Camp of OTO in Martinsburg, West Virginia. And this version was actually put out by William Siebert, New York, and distributed on behalf of the Typhonian Order. So it's it's a text that continues to live and resonate to this day. It's interesting, I recently read a comment that stated that the statement at the end of Liber Oz, it says, man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights, as being the most controversial statement of Liber Oz. And I've kind of really thought about what Liber Oz actually says, and I don't know, that to me, and somewhere I believe Crowley actually said that this is the same sort of sentiment that patriots have said over the years. And you look at some of the other statements that you read, where man has the right to love who he will. The idea of this is regardless of caste, socioeconomic status, race, gender, that continues to be a very controversial idea in our world today. The idea that man has the right to move as he will on the face of the earth. I mean, we have, immigration crises and refugee crises that people are in heated arguments about. man has the right to die as he will. I mean, the right to die is still very much contested in the world. So I think much of these basic freedoms that Crowley outlines continue to be very controversial and are worth fighting for. And I thank all of you for being here today as we celebrate and affirm these rights that we all have. Love is the law, love under will.